All right. Hello, everyone, as you're signing in, and welcome to Kathy. You can go ahead and come off of mute and join in. I'm Ellen Roach. I am speaking to everybody from Washington, D.C. And as you're signing in, here are just some instructions for how to engage. So we are on a live stream with colleagues from the Hunt Institute, from the National Center for Montessori in the Public Sector, both friends and colleagues of ours here at Trust for Learning. Wherever you are watching, you can ask questions, you can add comments by just using the comment function wherever you are underneath of your video. So please feel free to do that as we get started chatting. I will remind you of that about halfway through. We'll try to save like 20 minutes for questions. I think people will have lots. So yeah, feel free to send them in as we go, and we'll go ahead and get started. Kathy, welcome. Thank you so much for being
Thank
here.
you. It is so much fun to be here. And it's so much fun to be with you.
I know. Yeah. We don't usually do webinars or live streams on a Friday, but it is beautiful where I am. I was like, we have Kathy Hirsh-Pasek. We're not going to have any trouble getting people to come on a Friday. So yeah, we've got like hundreds of friends streaming in from, I'm sure,
Oh,
across the US,
so great.
probably people elsewhere. And I think probably everybody knows you and knows your work, but if you will indulge me, I want to actually read your bio. I have a
Oh my
feeling people
gosh.
are like, well, at least part of your bio. I couldn't read the whole thing. I was reading it this morning and I was like, all right, I'll do the first paragraph. Um, so if you're listening in, you hear Kathy Hirsh-Pasek and you think playful learning. You think, oh, I think I saw her in Babies on Netflix. You think about language development, right? But I want to make sure people have at least a snapshot of your breadth of work, your current work, some of the work that you're just getting started, maybe future work. So just to give everybody a little bit of a grounding in Kathy's abbreviated bio. Dr. Kathy Hirsh-Pasek is the Stanley and Deborah Lefkowitz Faculty Fellow in the Department of Psychology at Temple University and a Senior Fellow at the Brookings Institution. Her work examines the development of early language and literacy, as well as the role of play and learning, which is really what we're going to focus on today with her new book out. Um, she has been working for a very long time with Roberta Golinkoff, the co-author of this book. She has published 17 books to date, hundreds of scientific publications, many awards, just to name a couple of them. The American Psychological Association's Bronfenbrenner Award, the APA's Award for Distinguished Service to Psychological Science, the Association for Psychological Sciences James McKean Cattell Award, the Society for Research in Child Development, SRCD's Distinguished Scientific Contributions, many, many, many others. But the cutest of the awards that I saw in your bio, Kathy, was the
Yeah,
Association of Children's
I
Museums
know. I love
Great,
that.
right, the Great Friends to Kids Award from 2023. I also was looking at your Google Scholar this morning because, of course, as a scientist, citations are one important way to think about influence. And for folks listening out there, Kathy's work has been cited more than 5,000 times just in the last year. Like, take a moment, right? 5,000 citations means in papers coming out around the world, people are citing Kathy and colleagues' work. So, yeah, I feel like you need no introduction, but thank you for being here. Thank you for
So,
writing this book.
Ellen, I just have to tell you that you missed the most important part.
Okay, please.
Okay. I mean, there's no, that stuff is fluff. But the real important stuff is that I have three amazing sons and three incredible grandkids. Ellie is 10 and Julian is 8.
Mhm.
And I have now little Sophie, who is just about 6 months old.
Oh my
So now
gosh.
that's an accomplishment.
I love that. I very good friends of mine had a baby in October and she is 5 months
Mm,
old. So what
yeah.
a moment to be in a baby's life,
Oh,
right?
oh,
Yeah.
right? The
Yeah.
best.
Congratulations on Sophie. Yeah,
Thank you.
so
Thank you.
you open the book with this perspective, right?
Hmm.
You talk about your experience as a parent, as a researcher, now as a grandparent. Um, Many of the folks on this live stream are, I'm sure, parents themselves. We've got educators, we've got principals, we've got Head Start site directors, we've got state policymakers working on pre-K policy. So I feel like the insights in the book translate really beautifully for both parents, right? When you're thinking
Hmm.
about how do I support my own child, but also for all of us trying to figure out how to use the science of child development to make really good policy. So yeah, I'm excited to talk
Thank
more with
you.
you. I'll just plug too. So I feel like I know the research on playful learning pretty well.
Hmm.
And I was excited to read the book, but I got into it and actually learned a ton. Like there was a ton that
Oh, that's great.
you've encapsulated, you've synthesized beautifully brain development research, language development research, math and numeracy development research, and research on play. So highly recommend the book. I feel like it's great for like a book club, right? If you've got like teachers
Hmm.
coming back over the summer, it would be a great book club for a group of educators. So yeah, thank you for this book. So let's start with like kind of a cautionary tale.
Okay.
Kathy, what is the Mozart effect? And how is it kind of a cautionary tale for us trying to interpret science?
Oh gosh, it was a while ago where we thought it's hard to even believe it, at this point. But if you actually played Mozart for your baby, that was going to be the step up. Now, it turns out you might not know this, but after the Mozart effect, people got so into wanting to rush development that they actually invented something called a pregaphone. I'm not making this up. Okay, so you took the pregaphone and you would put it on your belly, and then you actually got to read books and poems to your, fetus. And wow, then the kid would come out a genius, which was incredible. And I think the problem is that society and certainly marketing, like which parent doesn't want to have the best for their kid?
Mhm,
Right. Which policymaker doesn't want to ensure that they have a workforce,
mhm,
in 2030 or 2040? So we all want to make sure we're ahead of the game.
mhm,
And we started to believe that you could rush all this. And of
mhm,
course, the science says just the opposite. And it's kind of funny when you think of it, because we keep thinking we can rush brain development, but like nobody expects like a 7 month old to learn to run just
mhm,
because you're going to push it forward. So why do we do that? And it's one of those things like slow cooking. It's a little bit better when you let it marinate.
mhm, mhm. I love that. And I feel like that Mozart example is so potent. I mean, I
Oh my God.
remember
Yeah.
hearing about the original research, I guess in the 90s, and then
Yeah.
friends in my generation who've had babies in the last 10, 15 years, it's right there. It's like, oh, we got to play classical music for the baby, even in utero. So these scientific insights can be really cool, but that was a small study as you talk about in the book. And then it just sort of explodes into this craze and pressure on parents, right?
Well,
To
and
accelerate.
now, look at it now. I don't know how parents are surviving right now.
Mm,
Honestly, I have to tell you about a funny moment. I was in New York and with these people who I really, really like. They're great, on a panel. And the first one talks about all the wonderful pamphlets that
mm,
they have for parents. Okay. And the second one talks about the many things that her company has come up with to really help parents learn more so that they will be better parents. And I am literally sitting there feeling overwhelmed. Okay, so as
mm,
I told you, I had 3 kids. I high fived myself when I got them to school in the morning. I'm not kidding. I was like,
mhm,
oh, yeah, you are great. If
mhm,
I got breakfast in them, they were reasonably well dressed. I mean, at least, something was on other than pajamas. I
mhm,
felt like I had done great. I didn't have time to sit around and read all the pamphlets and
mhm,
all this is what you've got to do to make. I mean, it's awful. And now, as I'm watching baby Sophie, I did not know how many apps there were for newborns. Do you know that you can track literally everything? How much tummy time there is, how
mhm,
much the kid drank. I mean, really? Why do we need to know that? If the kid learns to smile and coo at 3 and 4 months, aren't we happy enough?
mhm, mhm. Yeah, my friends who have this beautiful new baby, I hang out with her all the time. They live like 10 minutes down the road. I'm always like, can I come wash the dishes? Which of course means, can I come snuggle the baby?
Yeah, yeah.
And her mom, the other day, with a little bit of like sleeplessness and kind of wide eyes, was like, Ellen, should I be stimulating her all day? And it was
Yeah.
this sort of anxiety, like how am I leveraging, right, this sensitive period? And my second question really gets to this. So you
Mm,
speak to this anxiety that parents feel,
hmm
or the
mm.
pressure that parents feel with the brain research that we now have, because they are like, okay, I'm the brain builder, I'm the
Yeah.
architect, right? And that's true for early childhood educators too. And you say that, in the book, you and Roberta want these parents to know the story of how children develop so that you can make wise choices based on the
Right.
scientific evidence and then apply that knowledge. And I think that anxiety, right, we can broaden to think about the whole field of early childhood or even K-12, where I originally started. For me, that exists at least two levels, right? Like you are a language researcher, one of the best known language researchers that I know of in the world. We know the third grade reading scores, right? We know the challenges of supporting all children to develop language and literacy in the ways that we want them to. And that knowledge creates this anxiety, this pressure, right? In the field of early childhood, as people have advocated for years to fully fund preschool at the state level, ideally, hopefully at a federal level, early childcare, all of these investments, we feel this pressure to then
Hmm.
produce extraordinary outcomes, school readiness outcomes for young children to prove that this investment is working, right? So we've
Yeah.
got
Yeah.
pressure on pressure on pressure.
Hmm.
So for me, part of why I love the book so much is that I think you are addressing this really profound irony, right? That we have a lot of beautiful science emerging from especially the last 10, 20, 30 years of research. And we want what's best for children, right? But we're ultimately like kind of misusing the scientific insights
Yeah.
and it's backfiring.
Yeah.
So like unpack that irony.
Okay. Well, first of all, you're a brain researcher. So what you know is something that nobody's thinking about, right? Having a conversation with a baby. Now, let me unpack that. What does it even mean to have a conversation with a baby? Well, I'm going to take you back to 3, 4 months. Okay. Claw. Then
Mhm,
you go, oh, really? Do
mhm,
you think that's fun?
mhm,
Cool. And waiting, by the way, till the baby gives the next response.
mhm,
That's the beginning of language right there.
mhm,
And then in the lab that you work in, Ellen, you guys have found that that's building brain connectivity and brain structure. Let me try to put my head around that. So I didn't need to buy a fancy language mobile. I didn't need to buy all the toys. I didn't need to do anything fancy with the monitor or play music that would interrupt that or take pictures all the time, which are interrupting the back and forth conversation. I needed to go. I'm actually having 6-month-old language intervention right now. It's not intervention, it's just what I do. So I'm on video chat with my baby who's in Chicago and I'm in Philadelphia.
mhm.
And I am telling you, we have the richest conversations.
Yep.
Okay,
Yep.
she's going into mono, she's now off of one syllable and she's doing two. So she goes, ah. And I go,
Mhm,
what? And
mhm,
she answers me. And this can go on for a minute. Okay, so why do I say that's where reading starts? I know that sounds ridiculous, but play with me. Okay,
mhm,
those collaborative, fun moments. And believe me, if you would have seen Sophie last night in this conversation where she was giggling for like a long time as
mhm,
we were having this conversation, I could have stayed on that video chat for an hour with her. But her parents, of course, eventually want the grandparents to go away. But it was amazing. Now that back and forth interaction becomes the seeds of what will be language, and you're not just regulating what's going to be language. Notice what's happening. You're kind of controlling the baby's opportunity to hold attention. Wait, attention? That's a
mhm,
key part of intelligence. We don't think about it. Or the famous, we have a term for it now, it's fancy, EF skills. Okay,
mhm,
executive function skills. What are those? I
mhm,
mean, the baby is building its memory,
mhm,
its attention,
mhm,
its language, and its flexibility to adapt to another human. Those are the relational skills through which a social brain starts to build knowledge. Okay, move up just a little bit. Now a baby starting to have attention, starting to have regulation. Wow.
Mhm.
Starts to see at around 9 months, right, that it looks somewhere and it wants to tell you where it's looking. And if you know, if you're paying attention, you
Mhm.
follow where the baby's looking,
Mhm.
right? And then you label it. And then the baby all of a sudden at 10, 11 months has a point.
Mhm.
Oh, and then if you follow the point, that by the way is very sophisticated. We have not found another animal that does pointing. Well, I might be wrong. There might be dolphin pointing. We're trying to figure that out. But aside from the dolphins, okay, that
Mhm.
little teeny finger, notice what's happening. The world's out there. Baby notices world. Baby lets you notice the thing baby's noticing.
Mhm.
You comment on it, and you are in a conversation that's building language. Now, the kids who have less of what I just described actually turn out to have less language skills. And it's not an issue of whether it's that you're in an under resourced or over resourced environment. If you are just taking under resourced kids, my student Lillian Massick found take the parents who then have more of those interactions and the ones who have less. And the ones who have more have better language skills at 3 years of age. Okay, you say you got me up to three.
Mhm.
Super. But the 3-year-old with strong language skills becomes the pre-reader in
Mhm.
kindergarten. The
Mhm.
3-year-old who has great language skills becomes the kid who's going to be successful. And in fact, oh my God, some of our colleagues have found this, right? That the kids who are read to more, the kids who had more conversations, look back at what they looked at. And they looked like conversationalists all the way before that. Now, where we make the mistake is that we don't understand that what reading is.
Mhm.
Reading is not looking at a phonics app. Oh, yes, phonics will turn out to be very important. But why?
Mhm.
The why is that reading is connecting the part of your brain that has visualization with the part of the brain that has language, right? And it builds this whole new cool area. I think I lost my thing. This whole,
We can
can you
still
still
hear
hear me?
you.
Okay.
Yep.
This whole new area,
Mhm.
and it's called the visual word form area, okay, that gets specialized for reading. It got co opted for reading. That is unbelievable. So it's linking vision and language, right? And in order to do this, especially with the kind of systems we have, you turn the visual into sound, and
Mhm.
then voila, you are starting to be a reader. Now, if you can sound out everything, like I can sound out b oh yeah.
Mhm.
Okay, I sounded out boy. I'm feeling really good about my BOY. And the teacher then says, just say it faster. And the kid goes, boy. If it doesn't turn into anything at the other end,
Mhm.
then you're lost. It's
Mhm.
not going to work.
Mhm.
So reading is what we call parasitic. It lives on, it feeds on
Mhm.
language skills. So if you don't have the language skills early on, you won't have the reading. And guess what? The kids who start reading earlier aren't necessarily the best readers later. Well, let me say that again. We studied it. The
Mhm.
kids who get all this reading, learning early, and I push down third grade down into kindergarten and pre-K, they're not necessarily the best readers when you
Mhm.
get into first and second and third grade.
Mhm.
Why? Because the other kids catch up because
Mhm.
they spend time having language and world knowledge.
Mhm. Oh my goodness, there's so much there. Yes, and Rosie, my current youngest nibbling baby, from the moment she came home, I would
Right.
come home and tell my partner, "Oh, I had the best conversation with Rosie today," right? Because it's
Yeah.
just this,
Yeah.
this beautiful back and forth that the babies can do basically from the beginning. Yeah, and then we get distracted from that, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you capture this so beautifully in the book. And, on this call, you're really among friends, right? Trust for Learning is a philanthropic
Yeah.
partnership, a
Yeah.
collection of funders. The whole mission, right, is to expand play-based, equitable, relational, early learning environments for kids and families prenatal to 8. So we know, and I personally know a lot of the research on how play-based, exploratory learning environments support all of those cognitive and academic skills,
Yep.
throughout preschool and beyond. But you highlight something that these were some of the things that were newer insights for me, and I think we don't talk about enough. You note a couple of studies where you compare children who've
Hmm.
gone to more academic
Hmm. Hmm.
preschools with children who've gone to preschools that are more play-based, they emphasize discovery. And you find that there really isn't a difference in terms of their school readiness or their cognitive skills. But you did find one difference, that there was this stress difference, right?
Yes. Dress
The,
difference. Yep.
yeah, the children in the academic, the more academic, the highly academic, maybe developmentally inappropriate academic, were more anxious,
Hmm. Hmm.
less creative than the kids
Hmm.
in the play-based exploratory school. In another, you find that children with greater direct instruction experience greater stress. So we're actually
Hmm.
doing a live stream next week with Dr. Nikki Bush from UCSF, who's just done this wonderful review of the research on how stress gets under the skin.
Hmm.
But for me, this like stress component may be one of those missing links between our really good intentions, right? We're like, we want kids to be able to read, so therefore flashcards and drill and kill,
Right. Right.
right? But then maybe we're stressing them out. So can you unpack the stress connection a little bit more?
Yeah. I mean, I think when kids always have to produce, then I think it's not fun anymore. I mean, one of my favorite recent studies showed that kids learn so much more when the object is to have fun and just be natural than when they're told they have to learn it for some outcome. And I remember feeling that way when I was a mini pianist, like I loved playing piano when I was a little kid, and I would write my own songs. And when did I stop? When my mother wanted me to play for somebody else. Like I just didn't want to do it, you know? I was doing it for me. So I think it's kind of like that. And we get the sense that faster is better. And then we have to rush our kids from activity to activity. Our kids need downtime and our kids need playtime. And believe it or not, the very richest interactions happen during those moments of exploration and discovery. People have also found that we have more conversations in those moments when we're
Mhm.
playing, which is really interesting. And then my favorite new study is about Gulich. It was from a group called Gulich and Company at et al. And they looked at people who were going to be top performers, okay, whether it's in the music field or the sports field. And they asked, did those top performers start, let me say it in a different way than they did, with the stress of having to go to a million classes, whether they be piano classes or clarinet classes or in soccer? And the
Mhm.
answer was no. It
Hmm.
turned out the top class performers, when they get older, all started as meanderers when they were little. How about
Meanderers.
that?
Mhm.
How about
Mhm.
that? And so I think if we look to programs, you talked about some of the schools, if we look to programs like a Reggio or a Montessori or any of what I call active, playful learning environments, that's where you're seeing great outcomes. In fact, Angel Lillard is about to, publish another book showing on what's
Mhm.
going on with Montessori education that makes it so great. And both of us think that it's something like play-based learning. I mean, Maria Montessori got it.
Yeah. Yes, we actually we interviewed her a couple months ago about one of their recent studies, but I didn't know that she was putting out another book. So I'm sure folks listening in will be really interested in that. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, and you said something before that reminded me of a line in the book that I just loved as you were describing these really beautiful moment-to-moment interactions, right? Where we know all of that development is happening across language, attention, working memory, emotional development, which is what I study, and happening without much effort, right? Just paying
Hmm.
attention, being present with a child. You say in the book that you want parents to relax. I think early in the book, there's this moment where you just have a one word sentence, relax, exclamation point.
Yeah.
Relax,
Yeah.
exclamation point,
Yeah.
right? And you say that you want parents to be able to relax and enjoy. And I think the way you put it is the emergence of intellectual life in their
Hmm.
child or of the intellectual self, right?
Hmm.
Enjoying that emergence with children, right?
Hmm.
Which points to the role of the caregiver or the educator or the parent in supporting this. And maybe we
Hmm.
don't
Hmm.
have to be as stressed, right? And I feel like if we can get that message out there, right,
Oh
to
yeah.
policymakers, to the way that we design schools and early learning environments, that there is actually a way to support development that is less stressful for teachers, less stressful for parents. I mean, we know the burnout rates in early childhood,
Oh my
especially,
gosh. Yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah. Yeah.
So,
Well, another thing is, I think the reason that I really loved rewriting this book is because I think it's that we miss a lot. We're
hmm,
so rushed in an attention economy
mhm,
that we don't notice the little things.
mhm,
And the little things are like mind blowing if you know to watch them. So I'll just give you two examples. I always liked Dr. Andy Meltzoff's, imitation study early in life, and the adult just goes sticking out its tongue multiple times. And by God, if the baby doesn't then stick out its tongue. All right, let's unpack that for a sec. Okay.
mhm,
How does the baby translate you're sticking your tongue out to a motor movement that it feels but cannot see of sticking its tongue? Now, if that isn't magical,
mhm,
I don't I don't know what is. And the other day I was watching Sophie. This is when she was, I guess, 4 months old. I just happened to be on the phone when Michael, my son, who's also a professor, also a psychologist, and
mhm,
is a good observer. But I'm like blown away on this call. And he goes, "What are you seeing?" And there she was with this toy called Fifi. It's an amazing little toy. It's got mirrors and crunch and everything and rings. And it turns out that Sophie opened, for the first time that either of us saw it, opened her thumb from her fingers,
mhm.
went toward Fifi, and grabbed the ring. I mean, let's just
I
think
know.
about that.
Mhm, mhm,
Now, we could have been busy doing something else, or, oh, the baby, give it Fifi, I'm going to look at my email. I get that. But take a moment to marvel,
mhm,
because when you do, I think you have an entirely different lens
mhm,
on what really matters for development and how to be a part of it.
mhm. I love that. Take a moment to marvel. Yes. And, you know, I'm skipping ahead to a question that's a little bit later in what I had planned, but
Yeah.
at the trust, we think through, we fund through this lens of ideal learning environments, 9 principles: play, relationships, equity as the first and foundational principle. And you, in the introduction to the book, you paint this picture of what you hope that children, once they've grown up, will reflect on about their childhoods, right? That they'll reflect on how much they enjoyed their
Right. Happy.
childhoods,
Yeah.
right? Like,
Yeah.
is children's happiness an outcome in and of itself, right? Separate from like, okay, it's good for all the other long-term things. Like, is that something that we should actually be thinking about as an outcome?
I would say in today's world, that'd be a pretty good outcome. Now, happiness. I'm not talking about happy because you went and took some drug or something like that.
Mhm,
No, I mean, really, the joy of having had great parents who
mhm,
paid attention to you,
mhm,
who gave you some agency in your life
mhm,
and marveled at it, who allowed you to explore who you were going to be, not who they wanted you to be. If I were to give what I think is my best advice in parenting, my three sons were very, very different people. I mean,
mhm,
their food tastes were different. That made dinner really tough. What they liked to do was unbelievably different, and I flew with it. You know, um, one really was like an intellectual from the start. I mean, I never remember a time when he wasn't turning over rocks and looking what was under them and exploring them and talking about them, and the rest of the family would go, "Please, can we move on?" But he needed that space and time. He needed to not be run to the next activity. The middle one liked to sing and act when he was as young as 3 years of age. And the youngest one, I don't know, he was kind of a mix of stuff. He was a people person, and he really got people and engaged, whether it was on the train or wherever. if they were ever going to grow up to be well functioning human beings, it wasn't because I was going to make them all lawyers. It
Mm-hmm.
was because I was going to let them have their dreams and try to facilitate those dreams and let them know fundamentally that they were loved and in a nurturing environment. And that love and collaborative environment where we talked about everything, I call that collaboration and communication, led to their really digging into content. Maybe different content, and that's okay, you know? But they all managed to get through school, even through middle school, which is the hardest of hard,
Mm-hmm.
right? And all of them are now good critical thinkers, creative innovators, and they have the confidence to take risks. Isn't that what we want? And
Mm-hmm.
we call those the
Mm-hmm.
6 C's.
Mm. I love that. Yeah. And it's sort of a playful question to think about, is happiness itself an outcome, or how
Mm-hmm.
to bring to life this principle, within our framework, that the time of childhood is valued for its own sake, right? Not
Right,
just
right, right,
because we're
right.
like, okay, we're pouring into these babies so that they all become lawyers and doctors and firefighters.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the time that I spend with babies, and part of my own research, is seeing how much time infants in particular spend in really joyful states, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're actually coming with a ton of joy,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
And
That
curiosity. And curiosity.
exactly, right. That I think we then start to put a lot of pressure on as they, as we feel this stress, and start to feel like, okay, we got to get the flashcards in front of them. Um, yeah.
I think there's another piece to this. It's kind of fun, which is we need to like put on our head of a 4 year old. And I'm serious about that. We spend a lot of time in our society, being conversation killers, curiosity killers, right? And
Mhm.
creativity killers. What would it mean if we played more?
Mhm.
Like, I think we need to reintroduce the concept of what I would call adult recess. And I don't know anyone who doesn't need some adult recess,
Yeah. Yeah,
right?
I'm feeling that. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's so much. I mean, it's part of why I study babies. It's like there is so much that we can learn from the way that humans arrive already operating, right?
Hmm.
Joyful, curious, relational, engaged, things that
Yeah.
we can
Yeah.
start to lose, right, as we get older. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm going to remind folks who are listening, we've got a couple of questions that have come in. Thank you. This is a good moment to make sure you've got your questions in the comments, questions or comments. We will get to as many of those as we can in a couple minutes. Um, let me just look at my questions and see, just in case we're getting short on time. Yeah, let's talk about this idea. So, I'm a PhD candidate finishing up my work, and I started my PhD because I was working at Trust for Learning, and I started reading the scientific literature. And I was
Hmm.
like, oh my gosh, right? It is so inspiring, so fascinating. And some
Yeah.
of what I was reading was some of the rat and mouse and prairie vole kind of animal models of early nurture and brain development, oxytocin receptor development,
Hmm.
right? So fascinating. You zero in on a couple of those, I think, rat studies in the book that are about this idea of the enriched environment, right? So I
Hmm. Hmm.
mentioned my friend with the baby. There was this like, should I be stimulating her all day
Yeah. Yeah.
question, right? But that pressure to enrich, right? We've talked about this in a few
Hmm.
different ways,
Hmm.
but yeah, how do you, as parents are feeling that, right? How am I enriching the environment? More toys, more apps, right?
Mm.
How do you kind of clear your head and like try to let some of that pressure to enrich go? What does the science actually say about that enrichment?
Well, I think we have to remember that those enrichment studies were done in comparison to nothing.
Mhm.
So if you have something versus you have nothing, the
Mhm.
something in the cage is better than the nothing in the cage. Okay. But now let's look at the environment that babies are born into. There are humans around. Humans are really interesting. Okay. I don't know if you have any people watchers out there, but like, just try to guess, what does that person do? Why is this, sit in your car outside the pharmacy one day, watch people going in. Why is he going in? Is he happy? Is he not happy? Does he like the person next to him? Not. Gosh, they have a whole social world to figure out.
Mhm.
That's sitting, talk about complex. Okay. We're still trying to do it and we're adults. All right. Next, let's look at the physical world. When that baby's in the crib, just in the crib, looking up at the ceiling, like what's a corner? How does a corner happen?
Mhm.
Well, that's a
Mhm.
wall.
Mhm.
I wonder if that's stable. I wonder if I can put my hand through the wall.
Mhm.
Why does this crib hold me up? Am
Mhm.
I going to fall through the bottom?
Mhm.
When I see a toy on a desk, is it a toy desk? Or is it the toy something separate from the desk?
Mhm.
These are all complex. Our world is complex enough to start. So
Mhm.
relax. All
Mhm.
that comes for free.
Mhm.
Trees come for free.
Mhm.
You know, the sky comes for free. The clouds in the sky come for free. That's not to say you should never have a toy. There are some great toys out there and they're a lot of fun. I love, still love construction toys and art toys and music toys. But I don't know that we need the gadgets and the bings and the buzzers because all they do is create kind of an induced ADD where we forget to notice the clouds and the trees and all the cool stuff. We still
Mhm.
play. My kids still play with me. I mean, we have a game, and now their kids play it with me, so we're still playing it, you know? And we have a game where we play Don't Step on a Crack. Don't
Mhm.
step on a crack. Don't step on a crack. Because
Mhm.
it's 3 steps forward and 2 steps back if you ever step on a crack. So that kind of stuff, or you're waiting for the elevator. Which elevator's going to come?
Mhm.
These are
Mhm.
like gamifying moments. And you know, even when we think we have to discipline, sometimes gamifying moments are just so much fun. My kids had this awful practice of needing to pick their nose. And like we needed to deal with the nose picking, you
Mhm.
know? When you get into polite society, picking your nose, especially if you're one who wants to eat it, is just
Oh
not cool.
God. We love
So what do we
dogs.
do? Yeah, so what do we do? So
Mhm.
we decided on the 7:15 rule.
Hmm.
My kids were like, the 7:15? What are you talking about? Okay,
Mhm.
at 7:15, you get to pick your nose.
Mhm. Mhm.
Okay? So if they ever started picking their nose, I would say to them, it is not 7:15. Then when it was 7:15, we had nose picking time,
Oh
and
my
it
God.
lasted for a whole minute. Okay?
Mhm.
Now, let's just look at how we use that moment. The
Mhm.
kids stopped picking their nose in public. That was good. By
Mhm.
about 10 seconds, they couldn't stand picking their nose more than 10 seconds at 7:15. So
Oh.
eventually, picking their nose just died.
Mhm.
Okay. And I think if we can create these fun moments in the natural world, we don't need other things to keep them occupied. On a train trip, on a bus trip, how many
Mhm.
red cars are there?
Mhm.
Can you
Mhm.
play the alphabet game? I'm not anti toy. I'm also not anti tech.
Mhm.
I just want everything to be of high quality for our kids, and I don't want any of it to suffocate
Mhm.
the real interactions, the love, and the relationships that are the real corner, the core of how we learn.
Mhm. I love that. I was hanging out with Rosie, the almost 5-month-old, a couple days ago, and we always hang out in the same space in her home. And that day there were some people doing some construction, right? So the environment had changed, and her curiosity, right,
Oh,
about
right?
noise, right? We do this thing where when she's starting to get a little distressed, I say, "Oh, we're going on a field trip," and we walk around the kitchen and we talk about the stuff in the kitchen. And she could see out the window the construction
Yeah,
people. And
yeah.
of course, I noted, like, right, like she's having this new experience, right? This new kind of moment to be curious about. I love that so much. Yeah, I want to really underline one of the, again, like theses of the book for people who are listening. I love this theme throughout, right? That caregivers, whether that's parents or early childhood educators or policymakers, as we're thinking about how to structure early childhood classrooms, that we can relax a little bit because of another, like, kind of meta caregiver, right? Mother Nature. You
Mm-hmm,
emphasize that human brains have evolved. Human
mm-hmm.
beings have evolved to arrive to learn through exploration and through play. Um, just in, the last minute or two before we take some questions, do you have any
Sure.
other like favorite scientific findings that demonstrate this, that like we arrive playful, we arrive exploratory. We don't have to work quite so hard to help children, especially in these first few years, learn.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know where we go with just scientific studies, but there are so many studies on play.
Mhm.
And just as one example, there was what we call meta-analysis. It's a fancy term for I took a whole lot of studies and tried to see if they were saying the same thing.
Mhm.
So this meta-analysis was done in 2022 by Skeen and a group of folks at Cambridge. And what did they find? They found that kids actually did better. All right, hold on to your seats here. In reading, in pre-math, in spatial skills, when they were playing than when they were not. And I'm going to give you one other study that I just love. A couple of them actually, but it's just kind of fun. We invented this thing called playful learning landscapes. So we go out and we take over park benches and we take over places people go, bus stops and libraries and supermarkets. Let me just give you two examples. All right. Supermarket, not easy place for parents. Okay. So you
Mhm.
go to the supermarket. This was in an under resourced environment. And we put up signs. And now the whole project cost me $65, just to be clear. It was an honors project, and a student was going out with this guy who drew pictures.
Mhm.
Okay, so it was a sign and it said, I do milk, and it was a picture of a cow. What else do I do? All right, now this was
Mhm.
like the level of these very complicated signs. When those signs were up, kids had 33% more language
Mhm.
with their kids than when the signs were down.
Mhm.
Wow.
Mhm.
One more example. My former postdoc student, Andy Bustamante, who is now a professor at University of California, Irvine. And he came up with this thing called fraction ball. That was another. We just went outside, repainted a basketball court. But now the 3-3 line is the one. Okay. Move in and you get 0.75. Move in, you get, 2/4 and you get half. Okay. So you can see how it goes.
Mhm.
Four times at recess for fourth to sixth graders. Four times, 15-minute recess. They went in and passed a standard fraction decimal conversion test.
Mhm.
Took the teacher usually 3 weeks to teach that,
Mhm.
but if they're playing, it comes naturally.
Yeah. I love that. Yeah, these are such good concrete examples. And we have so many ways that we can help school districts, that we can help states think through this lens, right? That play is
Mhm.
not just something that happens as a reward for sitting at your desk and, doing your worksheets, but it's actually how children learn.
Mhm.
So yeah, thank you. One more shout out, and then I'm seeing some great questions in the chat. So Kathy, you really called me and other scientists into awareness around the fact that generative AI, toys that are using AI, little cute fuzzy AI friends for babies are basically already here, right? You
Mhm. Mhm.
started, I got looped in on this last summer. Thank you for your leadership on this. We are still right at the
Thank you.
beginning of
Oh,
thinking
yeah.
about like what our children's world's going to look like. But just talk a little bit more about how you're thinking about the questions and the protections that we need to be thinking about and enacting as the adults in the room right now, as babies are being marketed these toys for which, as far as I know, we do not yet have any regulation.
No, we have no regulations. Europe is doing a much better job than we are. And I want to thank you for your leadership in jumping in and helping us get the message out to scientists. And a number of scientists, over 200 scientists, joined our petition. The basic idea is this. As I mentioned earlier, it's human back and forth interaction that literally builds baby brains. And we're putting things on the market like this cute little Wuffy that I just purchased. And you
Okay.
can have conversations with little Wuffy, and Wuffy will wag its tail. Now, it says in the marketing that little Wuffy is going to teach you love and relationships, okay, and responsibility. Now, I'm just saying, look here, okay, you can see that it probably isn't doing stuff on its own. It doesn't need to eat, right? It doesn't need to be walked. So, what responsibility is it possibly teaching? Also, these, new toys that have come out, some of them quite dangerous. Perg did a beautiful study and found out that if you asked a teddy bear and you were 5, where mommy hid the matches, it would not only give you an answer, but tell you how to strike a match. So, these things are a disaster, and probably more of a disaster for little kids than they are for the teens. I'm not saying they're good for teens too. What I like to do now is to separate out what I think of as the social companion toys from the potential learning toys. Look, if done right, I suspect we can create a system which is a closed system that at least has reliable information for caregivers and parents. And I think we should all talk about that. And if Trust for Learning is interested, we should put this out so that you can have real information without misinformation
Mm.
for the groups that need it. But for the young kids up through certainly age 8, I think the social companions have to go. It's a mistake. They're always wonderful, kind, complacent, and loving. But real 2-year-olds, when you meet them, are not going to act like the toys.
That's a fantastic synopsis. And I think you really helped me get my head out of the stand around this because I was just like, I don't want to think about it. We already have enough to worry about, right? It is so important. These toys are here. They are being marketed to parents and grandparents. So I think all of us need to add this, to our way of thinking about children's ecosystems in this generation of development. Okay, I'm going to transition to some of our questions in the chat.
You
We've got
got it.
really good ones. Would love to hear, Patty wrote in asking about your take on the anxious generation. And I know you started the book by talking a little bit about your work early in your career and this idea of the unhurried child. So
Mhm,
you give us a
mhm.
little synopsis of that?
Yeah, let me say first of all, hi Patty. It's always great to be in conversation with you, and you do ask the best questions. Um, Look, I think Jonathan's on to a grain of truth here. On the At the same time, um, the scientific literature thus far is very mixed. And if I were to take sides on it, as Candace Odger has done,
Mm.
um, she displays all that in some beautiful articles. One of them is recently published in the Atlantic. Um, Shows you that it's just not quite the way Jonathan portrays the literature. What do we know? And I'm going to go to young kids again because that's really my area of specialty. Um, I would like us to think about technology intruding on our humanness
Mm.
in 3 ways. Now, I've told you how important that human to human connection is, okay? Relationships. Isabel Howe calls it relational IQ. And if you want to hear more about her, just today, Remake Learning released a podcast that I co hosted with Greg Bear on that topic. And Isabel is awesome. So you can hear it straight from her. But I think there's 3 areas where we've kind of gone down a road we don't want to go down. The first one I'll call disruption. And disruption is we're constantly pulling out our cell phones. Okay. As adults, every 5 minutes, we're looking at our phones. What is that doing to these interactions that I spoke about? It's disrupting them. There is now outstanding science to say that when you disrupt that interaction, what happens is the kids aren't learning. You're not doing the attention maintenance. You're not doing language learning, right? You're not building the knowledge. So disruption. And there's lots of studies on it under the name that Jenny Radesky gave it called technoference.
Mm.
Second, when we talk about screen time and the quality of screen products, we have displacement.
Mm.
So we're using this as babysitters a lot. And when we do that, what are we displacing? We're displacing time with friends, listen to the human to human going out the window again, and time with us. It's much easier for us to say, I just got to get dinner done, so I'm going to put them in front of the television. I'm not saying that's a bad idea. I had 3 kids. Let me tell you, television was a blessing. Okay. On the other hand, we got to ensure the quality. And I think we want to watch so that we're not making it a full time job or a part time job. Right now, for kids who are 4 to 8, they're watching, I know you won't believe this, but they're watching up to 4 to 5 hours a day. And if they are, just take 4 times 7, 28. That's more than a part time job. So we need to be careful. And when we say, as parents, but our kids like it, I say back, yes, our kids like chocolate cake too. Does that mean you're no longer going to give broccoli and you're going to skip protein because they like it? So we have to be the parent in the room. All right, I'll call that disruption and displacement.
Mm,
We are on the verge of what I will call derailment, where derailment is what I think these AI toys could do and some of these virtual environments. If they derail human to human interaction as we know it, it then could jeopardize brain development. And if it does, I think we're doing worse by our kids, even though we don't mean to. So
mm.
that's how I'm looking at, the landscape right now.
Thank you. We can unpack each of those things. I'm going to
Yeah.
ask a couple more of these questions, really
Sure,
good
sure.
ones. Um, we have a question from YouTube. Curious if you know any research around how either deaf or blind learners co-opt parts of their brain, maybe motor cortex, to connect motion to reading. I think building on the story you were telling us of how different brain regions are
Yeah,
connected,
yeah,
kids have these
yeah.
interactions. Do you know any of that literature?
I do know a little bit about deaf
Mhm.
because I actually did my dissertation on that. And it's really interesting that the compensation is pretty amazing. My way, and if you know anything about sign language, part of sign language is its own language, by the way. It's not like purely iconic or anything. It's just a beautiful language, and used by natives in the deaf community. But there is something called fingerspelling, which, A, B, C, which connects almost directly with the system that gives us phonics, you
Mm.
know?
Mm.
So it is one way in. It's a little harder to read an alphabetic system when you don't have a language or translation that is automatic.
Mm.
But I know a lot of people are looking at that question right now for deaf readers. I would imagine for Braille that it should work exactly the same as it does for spoken language.
Mm.
With Braille, you just have a different kind of phonics
Mm.
to be able to use.
Mm.
It's not really phonics; it's visual information to be able to use.
Mhm.
Still connecting back to language.
Yeah, amazing. We've got I think, both practical and sort of theoretical questions
Yeah.
for something the trust works on quite a bit. But, we could go around to every parent, right, and say, okay, back off on the flashcards, relax, enjoy, your child, engage in those
Yeah.
moment interactions. But, right, our publicly funded systems
Hmm.
are by and large not necessarily supporting that. It varies by state, it varies by site, by center. We support ideal learning environments around the country who are really taking this on, even though the policy climate is not always friendly to exploratory play-based learning. But how do we help parents buck the system, right? If you don't have that beautiful play-based Reggio or Montessori or
Yeah.
preschool, what do you do?
Well, I'll tell you, I'm currently on a funded Lego project where we are bringing what we're calling active playful learning into 4 states right now, into schools in Virginia, in schools in California, schools in Illinois, and schools in Texas.
Mm.
And so far, the teachers are so excited about it that 92% say they would recommend it to anybody. They
Mm.
say they're seeing changes. The coaches say they're seeing changes. And we're now doing a lot of observations to see if we can see those changes in the classroom as
Yeah.
well. In Connecticut, they actually have evidence of some outcomes using these very active, playful learning principles. So, bottom line is it works.
Mm.
Bottom line is we should go to the policymakers, which I am doing, and say, hello, guys. Your reading scores have not gone up, even though you dumped recess and you dumped pretty much everything but reading and math. And if I look at what I'm getting as a return on investment and you were a business, I would say you should close the business.
Mm.
So we need another way. What we're doing doesn't work. And everything we've seen in active playful learning does work. So as I say, we're out there studying it now. We're in the third year of this project. It's very, very exciting and I think very unbelievably promising. Now, there's 2 ways to go. One is change the laws. In New Hampshire, Oklahoma, Connecticut, we have changed the laws. And that's very exciting. I was part of what that meant in New Hampshire.
Hmm.
Started with kindergarten, moving it up to fourth grade.
Hmm.
And just this week, we were able to change a law in Oregon
Hmm.
so that they will be the next state to join us, with a lot of other states showing real interest.
Mhm.
So I think the answer is change to something that will give you joyful classrooms and deeper learning.
Mhm.
And our book that came out a couple years ago called Making Schools Work
Mhm.
um, actually shows you how to do that.
Amazing. Thank you. Yeah, we work with educators and school leaders, site directors all over the country, and what we are seeing anecdotally, which we hope to eventually study, is
Mm,
that the ideal learning environments that we support in all different kinds of contexts have significantly lower levels of teacher turnover and burnout, right?
yeah.
It's actually a more joyful and uh, enriching kind of environment for all humans, right? Not
Hmm.
just babies, to be in a more relaxed, playful, exploratory kind of
Oh, yeah.
environment.
Joy
Kathy.
really helps. It really helps. And I'll just say one more thing. It's like a mantra that I live by. If
Mm,
we teach in the way that human brains learn,
mhm,
the likelihood is that kids will learn more. So, how do they learn? Let's just think about what we know in the science of learning.
mhm,
We know that kids learn better when they're active, not passive.
mhm,
We learn more when we're engaged, not distracted. We
mhm,
learn more when it's meaningful rather than we don't know why we're learning it. This sound like Harry Met Sally or Sally Met Harry. And in the next one, we learn when it's socially interactive. We
mhm,
didn't learn as much during COVID because it wasn't socially interactive. We learn when it's iterative, presented in multiple
mm,
different ways toward a
mhm,
goal.
mhm,
And we learn when it's joyful. Now let's just go through those characteristics again and compare them to what we're doing. Active. Does that look like sitting in rows, looking up at somebody talking at you?
mhm,
No. Engaged? No, no. Actually, we've looked at it, and it turns out that over 50% of the time, in 1,100 observations of 42 classrooms, the kids are being talked at. They're being talked at. What's
mhm.
happening the other 50%? Well, 16% of the time they're inattentive. Well, duh.
Yeah.
Okay. And I could go on and on. How much time do you think they spend in interactive?
Mhm.
2%,
7%? Oh, geez.
2%. There's
Oh,
not even discussions with the teachers. So
uh,
it's no wonder that
mhm,
what we're doing in schools isn't working.
mhm,
You could just go through the, is it meaningful? Generally not. Is it, joyful? No. It's not socially interactive. So we're doing the antithesis and
mm,
expecting deep learning, and we're expecting to raise kids who are going to outsmart robots. I don't think so. So
mhm.
that's the way I look at it.
I could truly pick your brain all day. I'm inspired by the book. I'm inspired talking to you. And I wanted to just close with something that you wrote toward the end of the book with Roberta
Yeah.
that I just feel like is so powerful, especially for people on this call, right? So folks on this call might actually be making those policy decisions or making those classroom practice decisions or running a
Mm-hmm.
preschool or Head Start center. So Kathy writes, this book joins others that continue the conversation between science and application. When
Mm-hmm.
these worlds meet, we will be able to give play back to children. Give play back to children, right? So beautiful. Thank you for all of your work. We're going to flash up just very quickly. Jihan can go ahead and pull up our just final slides so people know where to buy the book. And also to let everybody know that next week we are co-hosting the other of these live conversations I mentioned earlier. So please go ahead and grab this book. It really is fantastic. Kathy, I do not know how you do it all. Tireless advocate for children, running a lab, generating new insights. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Please, go ahead and grab the book and share it with folks. And then next week, we're doing another live stream with Dr. Nikki Bush. She did a 70-year synthesis of
Oh,
the
wow.
mechanistic science of how stress gets under the skin, right? So we know about nurture, we know about stress and how these different mechanisms are operating. We're also exploring these topics on the podcast that we're launching later this year. So feel free to join the Trust listserv to grab that. It is 2 o'clock. I don't want to keep you, but Kathy, anything else you want to share as we start to say goodbye?
I just want to say that we share everything. So, for those of you who are interested in how to get the community support, go to playfullearninglandscapes.com And you'll see how we put that all together. We welcome you. Write us. We answer our emails. And also go to activeplayfullearning.com for those of you who are in the education space and want to know how to put active playful learning into your schools, in your state, in your district. We share everything, the workshops, the manuals, what we're collecting, and we invite you to join with scientists. And I know I speak for my colleagues, toy industry too. We're here for you. If we do it together, we can make the best stuff for kids.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. We will, when we share this recording, from the Hun Institute, from the Trust, from NCMPS, we'll make sure to link to those resources as well. So for folks listening, this will be sent out as a recording so you can revisit the many, many insights that you've shared. Thank you, Kathy. I
Thank
appreciate you.
you.
We appreciate you. Yeah. Okay, everybody have a good weekend and hopefully talk to you soon. Thanks. Bye.